It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The jail cells of England were brimful last night of 522 peaceful protesters arrested for holding up cardboard placards. A quarter of them were old-age pensioners. A fifth of them were in their 70s. One was a woman in her 90s. Two were women in their 80s. There were blue bloods, aristocrats, former army officers. 14 years in prison they faced. 7,350 years in prison. Except they've now all been released and none of them have been charged. Who will pay for this fiasco? Well, the British taxpayer is already paying. And as the great summit in Alaska Nash, our Alaska, is getting ready, we'll be asking our expert analysts what they expect from the deal. As deal, there surely has already been done. And civil war looms in Lebanon as the puppet regime in Beirut is instructed, their word, not mine, by Israel and the United States of America to disarm the Lebanese resistance. What could possibly go wrong? You'll find out here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It must have been a red letter day for burglars and other miscreants yesterday because cops were pulled in from the entire country to police a peaceful demonstration of largely old people holding cardboard placards. I'm not making it up. One of the people arrested was a blind man in a wheelchair who could not walk, who could not see, who could not even see the placard that he was holding, but he was absolutely sure that he meant what it said on the tin. It's the blind leading the blind. The Labour government, yes, Labour government, made a gigantic blunder when it sought to proscribe a group of peaceniks, civilly disobedient but non-violent peaceniks, as terrorists. Terrorists are people who blow themselves up at children's pop concerts. Terrorists are people who blow themselves up on underground trains and on buses. Terrorists are people that harm, hurt, kill other people. Whatever else was being done by the group whose name I cannot yet speak, for reasons not of fear of the law, but fear of the censor, fear of algorithm. Whatever else they were, they definitely were not terrorists. And the vast majority of British people know that that is the case. That's why the 522 who were arrested yesterday could not be charged, for if they were charged, they would have to be tried. And because the charge is terrorism with a 14-year sentence, they'd have to be tried in front of a jury. And no jury in the country would send to prison people who look like their own children and grandchildren, who only want to stop the killing, who spray red paint on weapons of war as a means, paltry as it might seem to some in power, of trying to stop the red blood that would be shed by those same weapons of war. It was an act of madness, and I would like to blame it only on the government, but I cannot, because the government very sagely referred the matter to what is laughingly called our Parliament. And our Parliament voted in record quick time in both houses, the elected and the unelected, with a tiny minority in the House of Commons of only 36 members of Parliament, voted against the proscription of a group of peacenik, civil disobedient protesters as terrorists. This is a kind of madness. Who's going to pay for it? The Home Secretary, Yvettecooper, the most overrated politician it has ever been my misfortune to encounter in Parliament across 5 decades. I have never seen a woman more overpraised, more over-promoted than Yvettecooper. Her majority is only 6,600, and we are coming to get you, Miss Cooper, at the next election. In fact, we should have got you at the last one. The Home Secretary at least has to pay with her job for a fiasco that has already cost the British taxpayer millions. They brought police officers all the way from Wales. They didn't even have the sense to wipe out the Welsh language on their hats and vests. The Metropolitan Police could not cope with arresting 550, most of them elderly people. They could not cope with arresting men in wheelchairs who were blind. They had to bring people in from all over. The cost of all of this, 522 arrests, and the jail time overnight accordingly, with no charges. But of course, hundreds of people have already been charged. And it's the dawning realization, which that blind man could have seen coming, that none of these charges can possibly be sustained in a court of law, that has led to this public relations disaster. I don't know if Labour members of Parliament who voted in overwhelming numbers for this madness, as they have supported the madness in Gaza since the very first day when they got their marching orders from their leader, the Stumer, Sir Keir Starmer. I don't know if these members of Parliament have yet understood how bad this all looks. And who's going to pay the political price for it? It's not the organization in question. If they were able to open their books, they'd have 100,000 new members. If they were able to open a bank account, they'd have $1 million before you could say Jack Robinson. The political price is going to be paid by the Labour Party, which has supported this genocide in Gaza and sought to brutally criminalize the decent British people who have risen up against it. So presumably next Saturday, they're going to have to arrest another 522. And presumably next Sunday, they're going to have to announce that none of them have been charged. And this will go on and on and on as long as this madness lasts. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Alaska, but I'm perfectly sure that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will not be going there without knowing what's going to happen. No two powerful presidents like them sit together in a room not knowing what the outcome is going to be. You don't ask questions to which you don't already know the answer. That's the rubric in the courtroom, and it's the rubric in politics at this kind of level. Some in Russia are afraid that some harm will befall Vladimir Putin on American soil, though once upon a time, of course, Alaska belonged to Russia. Nash, Alaska, Nash, our Alaska. It's only a social media meme, but there's a remarkable number of people quacking around behind Zelensky who think that it's a real demand, but it isn't. Russia has no designs on Alaska. After all, it was sold for a price agreed between the two parties. Like the Louisiana purchase, the purchase of Alaska has mightily profited the United States of America. But Russia and America are only 2.5 miles apart, you know, at their closest level in Alaska. And so I don't know why they don't build a bridge, actually, between Russia and the United States, Alaska. There you go. There's a piece of advice for nothing. You could call it the Peace and Friendship Bridge. And we hope, all of us pray, that peace and friendship will be the net result of the summit meeting taking place on the 15th of August. My birthday is on the 16th. I'm hoping for the best birthday present of all, namely the announcement of the end of a war which has cost the lives of millions of people, cost trillions of dollars, lost 9 million Ukrainians to the wider diaspora, most of whom, I promise you that, will never return to their home country, and landed the European Union in the mother of all pickles, because in their rush of blood to the head that they have been experiencing collectively for all this time, they have made promises to the rump Ukrainian state that will surely emerge from Alaska that it's going to be very expensive to keep. They've put them on a fast track for membership. So those of you in the European Union, get used to a very, very, very large sum of money leaving your country's bank accounts headed for Kiev. It won't be Zelensky that's in charge, of course. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if he fled the country on the day of the summit, because he's been quacking around and getting his ducklings in a row in the European Union to try and sabotage the result of the summit in Alaska. But I fear it's too late. I fear that the European Union and its taxpayers have got another Kosovo on their hands, except much, much bigger. They've got another Kosovo on their hands in the sense that Ukraine will quickly be the fountain which issues forth sex trafficking, narcotics, weapons for terrorists and criminals, and that age-old export of Ukraine poor girls sold into prostitution. It is estimated that in Germany right now, before the collapse, half of all the prostitutes working in Germany are poor Ukrainian girls and women. Get used to the fact that the Albanian criminals you've grown used to in your capital city are about to be supplanted and replaced by Ukrainian criminals and traffickers. Not before there's been a lot of shooting, not before there's been a lot of turf warring, but trust me, that is coming your way. The deal, which my good friend Che Bose has speculated about, seems to me he's almost exactly right. If a deal is reached in Alaska, the effective border of East and West Ukraine will be the river Dnipro, which those of you who've been watching me from the beginning of this war already know that that's what I predicted right at the beginning. It is the natural border for a demilitarized zone. It may not be de facto or de jure, rather, recognition of the new Russian territories, but it will definitely be de facto, because no power on earth is going to remove the Russian armed forces and the decisions made by the referenda in those liberated territories to rejoin Mother Russia. That ship has sailed. Crimea has sailed. The Donbass has sailed. In fact, the only unresolved question now for me is the great Russian city of Odessa, built by order of Catherine the Great, the then Empress of Russia. I don't know if you've been to Russia, but if you have, and if you've also been to Odessa, you'll know that no city could be more quintessentially Russian and Russian Orthodox than the city of Odessa. It is a kind of Jerusalem for the Russian ethnic populations, not just in Russia, but throughout the diaspora. As far away as Moldova, they look to Odessa as their Jerusalem. If that remains under the control of the ultra-nationalist government in Kiev, I predict that there will be further change, perhaps not of a military nature, but of a revolutionary nature. But we'll be discussing all of this with Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive, just a bit later from now. So let me move on to the Lebanon. As some of you know, maybe most of you know, I entered the Arab world through the portal of the Lebanon. In 1977, I went there to visit the Palestinian struggle there in the camps to which they had been driven from their Jordanian camps on Black September of 1970. 7 years later, they were all ensconced in Beirut, and I fell in love with the Arab world, the Arabic language, Arabic music, Arabic food at that moment in time. So Lebanon matters to me. The west of Beirut was where I lived, in the Fakane district near the Coca-Cola factory. I spent a lot of great times there. My heart bleeds when Lebanon bleeds. It matters to me personally. And so when I saw the ignominious, shameful, and frankly unforgivable performance of what passes for the government in the Lebanon today, openly declaring that they are taking orders from the Israeli foe that has invaded them, occupied them, bombed them, assassinated people, I was embarrassed for them. I was embarrassed to hear the Minister of Defense of Lebanon, I heard him say, I saw his lips move, "We have been instructed," he said, instructed by Israel and the United States to proceed forthwith with the attempt to disarm the Lebanese resistance. Now, they are unable to do that. That became clear within an hour or two when literally millions of people spilled onto the streets of Lebanon, condemning this decision and declaring their complete opposition to it. Now, you cannot disarm people through a sea of millions of people who support the Lebanese resistance. So they will not succeed in doing it, but they may succeed in destroying Lebanon in the trying. Because if they are acting under instructions from Israel and the United States, then it would appear that the immovable object is set to meet the irresistible force. Now, in military terms, the Lebanese resistance could polish off the Lebanese army, a conscript army, in an afternoon, and indeed has done so in the past. If the Lebanese resistance had wanted to rule all of Lebanon, they could have done so at any time over the last few decades. But they do not want to do so. Hassan Nasrallah would have been the president of Israel, of Lebanon, if Israel had not made it plain that the confessional structure of Lebanon, where the Christians have to have the presidency, the Sunni Muslims have to have the premiership, and the Shiite Muslims, who are the majority of all Lebanese, must make do with the speakership of the parliament. Israel made clear, America made clear, that this blatantly sectarian gerrymandering would have to continue. So Hassan Nasrallah never wanted to be the president because he never wanted to upset the sensitive apple cart that is the Lebanese Republic. But if they're going to try by force and disarm a resistance that is supported by millions of Lebanese, they better bring a bigger brother with them. And that bigger brother will, of course, be Israel. So Lebanon may very well be about to be torn apart by an Israeli-Lebanese government alliance, which will have grave consequences for the entire Levantine region. Its echo will be felt in Syria. Its echo will be felt throughout that part, at least, of the Middle East. And it's unlikely, and we'll hear from Professor Marandi later, that the Iranians will allow their brethren in Lebanon to go down without doing anything and everything they could in order to save them. In Gaza, well, we'll be talking to Daniel Davis about that. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
The poll this evening: will Netanyahu annex Gaza into Greater Israel? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. Do subscribe to that channel because that's our castle of last resort. You can vote on my X and on the YouTube community poll and on the YouTube stream. If you're watching us on the YouTube stream now, make sure you've subscribed to my channel, please, and that you give the show a thumbs up and that you share with all of your friends and contacts there that we are broadcasting at the highest level. The votes are pouring in. 22,713 people have already voted, and I'm only now just announcing it. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Throughout the series of emergencies, we have all benefited greatly from the tutoring of our professor, Seyed Mohammad Marandi, professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. And boy, do we need him to explain what's happening now. Professor, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. I want to tour the horizon with you, but if I can start with Lebanon, a country which matters a lot to both of us, I know. What do you think are the consequences of the Lebanese government's decision to proceed with the American-Israeli order to disarm the Lebanese resistance?
Well, George, thank you very much for inviting me. I couldn't hear the first part of the question, so I'll respond, and if there's anything left out, please let me know and I'll explain further. I think all of this is both good and bad. Over the past few months, everyone has been exposed in this region. Over the last 2 years, everyone has been exposed, but over the last few months in particular. In Syria, oil and gas-rich dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, whose overlords are in Washington, they've been using sectarianism. They've blinded so many people and clouded the truth through sectarianism and religious and racial hatred towards the reality in Syria. Now that Al-Qaeda and Daesh or ISIS and Al-Qaeda have come to power and they've been slaughtering people, the mask has been removed. The mask of the regimes in Doha, but also those in Turkey, in Türkiye, the Erdogan government who've been supporting them, their masks have been removed. They've been done nothing to support the Syrian people. The country is falling apart. These extremists are murdering not just the Alawites, not just the Druze, not just the Christians, but moderate Sunnis. They're being exposed. In Lebanon, too, we see the same forces who've always been targeting Hezbollah, which has made huge sacrifices for the people of Gaza. Alongside Ansarullah in Yemen, they've made the biggest sacrifices. In fact, I'd say that Hezbollah made the biggest sacrifices because they are right next door to Palestine, and the Israeli regime carried out a huge slaughter against the people of Lebanon. And especially this was difficult for Hezbollah because it had so many internal enemies that are affiliated to the West. Now those groups that are affiliated to the West are all aligning themselves with one another, with the Israeli regime, and with Jolani in Damascus in order to destroy the resistance. So basically what we've seen is that NATO, through Erdogan, and these dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, they've been trying to demolish the Northern Resistance Front. Who benefits from this? Of course, the Israeli regime, because they are in cooperation. They're cooperating with the Israeli regime. Erdogan wants his mini Ottoman Empire in northern Syria, northern Lebanon, northern Iraq, and the Caucasus, and he will allow, or will be forced to allow, the Israeli regime to expand, the greater Israel to grow, and there will be points of friction, but there's no doubt that the Israeli regime will have the upper hand. And the countries in the Persian Gulf region, they're all aiding the Israeli regime as well, as we're seeing today in Lebanon. So in a sense, it's a good thing. All the masks have been removed. The European masks over the last 2 years have been removed through their support of the Holocaust. These regimes, their masks have been removed. But of course, the suffering of the Syrian people and the fears that we have for the people of Lebanon remain in place. But I am confident that the resistance in Lebanon will gain the upper hand. And I hope there's no strife, there's no military strife in Lebanon. But it is interesting that as the regime in Beirut, the pro-American regime in Beirut, is trying or threatening or deciding to disarm Hezbollah, the Israeli regime is murdering Hezbollah affiliates and citizens of Lebanon on a daily basis.
Well, I lived in Beirut in 1977, and there had just been a civil war. And that was a civil war of a much smaller scale than would happen today, because then, if you'll forgive me saying so, I was completely unaware that there were any Shia people in Lebanon in 1977. They were not at all a political factor. This was a civil war between the pro-Israeli Christian fascist militias and the Arab nationalists and their Palestinian PLO allies. And it was a civil war of great devastation. But the forces involved in it were more limited than the forces that would be involved in a civil war in Lebanon now. So I'm praying that it doesn't come to that, because I don't see how Lebanon could survive that. Now, I know the capabilities of the Lebanese resistance. I also know, and I don't want to be overly disrespectful, the capabilities of the Lebanese armed forces. They're clearly a mismatch, as has been demonstrated before. So if they're going to try and take the weapons from the resistance, it ain't going to be the conscripts of the Lebanese army that does it. It will have to be foreign forces, international forces. Do you think we're really looking down the barrel of that gun?
First of all, we have to keep in mind that the resistance in Lebanon has popular support, and it goes beyond, far beyond the Shia community. The Palestinians, huge segment of the Palestinian population in Lebanon, support the resistance. They know that the only people who sacrificed their lives and the lives of their families and their friends and neighbors, they come from this resistance, from Hezbollah. And in the local elections that we saw after the genocidal war that the Israeli regime carried out, we saw that the resistance won everywhere where it participated. So they have popular support across Lebanon. They have the majority. Of course, the Americans are supporting their militias, their fascist allies like the Lebanese forces, among others. And of course, there's Jolani. Remember, Jolani has been sending messages to the Israeli regime regularly saying, we have the same enemies. Our only two enemies are Iran and Hezbollah. But again, this is exposing the reality in this region to people across the world and to the Muslims across the world who were very much influenced by propaganda from oil and gas-rich dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, whether it's Qatar or Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. Now that masks are removed, and I do not think that they will succeed. The conscript army that you speak of, many of them, most of them, they are supporters of the resistance. They come from those communities that support the resistance, among both Muslims and Christians and Druze. So the regime in Beirut is not going to win. They will be defeated if they go down the road of civil war. But they are in the pockets of the United States. They do as they are told. At least that's what they've been doing so far. And there's no doubt that Iran will support Hezbollah. And there are many ways in which Iran can do that. And if Jolani interferes on behalf of the Israeli regime and others to help fight against Hezbollah, he will be in serious trouble because Iraq will not accept that, Iran will not accept that, the resistance will not accept that, and Hezbollah, as you rightly pointed out, it is the most powerful force in Lebanon by far, and it is much stronger and more competent than Jolani. The only thing that could possibly happen would be for the Israeli regime, along with Jolani and the regime in Beirut, for them to collaborate together against the resistance. But again, that's not something that Iran will allow to happen. And I think the 12-day war of aggression that the Israeli regime carried out against Iran and the punishment that it received, we should all recall what Steve Bannon said. He said that the real story, the unknown story of this war is that Trump saved the Israeli regime and Netanyahu because they were taking a big, bad beating during the last days of the war. The Israeli regime should be very careful about how it behaves, and so should Jolani, because Iran's capabilities today are far better than they were just a month ago.
Now, you mentioned Iran, of course, and let's turn to that. It seemed to me the most significant development over the last week or so is the Trump corridor, which he has negotiated. They'll probably build a Trump Tower on it, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Ancient foes indeed, they were at war not even a 12-month ago. But hey presto, they've come together in Washington, and Trump has got himself a new piece of territory that he's going to be responsible for. Tell us what that's all about and what Iran's reaction to it is.
Well, first I'd like to give a very brief history, and that is when Armenia launched an attack on the Republic of Azerbaijan decades ago. The Iranians condemned that. And in fact, the Iranians were training volunteers in the Republic of Azerbaijan so that they can retake back what was legitimately theirs. And then the Americans ordered Aliyev, the current president, to expel the Iranians. So the liberation of his own territory was delayed for 3 decades because he obeyed the United States. And I've shown footage on Twitter of Iranians training these Azeris. Now it's the other way around. With the support of the Israeli regime and Erdogan, the Republic of Azerbaijan attacked Armenia. They liberated territory that was theirs in accordance with international law. Of course, they ethnically cleansed the Armenians, which is a huge violation and a crime against humanity. But they took back their territory. But the Iranians have said that if Aliyev tries to take Armenia, it will mean war. And the Iranians have put lots of troops on the border to send that message. So what the Iranians from the beginning were supporting was the territorial integrity of both the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Republic of Armenia. Now what the United States is doing is it's trying to build a corridor. That's what the Azerbaijan, the Aliyev and Baku and Erdogan have been trying to do for a long time, to cut off the link between Iran and Armenia. Iran has said about this, both when Erdogan and Aliyev were attempting this, and now that Trump has been trying to do this, that if there is a land bridge between the two parts of the Republic of Azerbaijan that does not impede Iran's access to Armenia and through Armenia to Georgia and Russia and the Black Sea, Iran has no problem with that. That is a sovereign decision to make by the Armenian government. They can do whatever, they can have a transport corridor between the two sides, just like Iraq can have that, Pakistan can have that, anyone else can do the same. But if there is an agreement where the Armenian government no longer has authority over its territory, and there is a possibility that Iran's access is impeded by any means, that will not be tolerated in Tehran. George, they will not tolerate that. Even if it has to, even if the country has to go to war, they will not tolerate that. So that area of Armenia has to remain under the authority of the government of Armenia. There cannot be foreign troops there, and no one will be allowed to impede Iran's access to Armenia in any way or form, whether it's Aliyev's forces or it's Trump's mercenaries or contractors, it doesn't matter. Iran's access through this border must remain unimpeded, just like any other border. Iran's relationship with Armenia must be just like its relationship with Azerbaijan and Iraq and Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and so on.
I mean, plainly, Iran has vital national interests at stake in this, but it's hard to avoid the conclusion that this is as much aimed against Russia as it is aimed against Iran. Just as the Ukraine might be coming off the boil, they want to create a stew in the south, in the Caucasus, in the near abroad of Russia. Is that how you read it?
There's no doubt that that is what they want. And George, I'm not in the Iranian government, so I can speak openly. Erdogan, instead of supporting the Palestinian people, he's been helping the Israeli regime during this whole period. And he's been trying to undermine the resistance and Iran and the axis of resistance during the last 2 years, in particular, in alignment with the Israeli regime. His ally in Baku, the dictator Aliyev, is an ally of Netanyahu. His ally in Syria tells Netanyahu, this Al-Qaeda and ISIS thug, Ashara or Jolani, has been telling the Israelis that our enemies are only Iran and Hezbollah. So instead of helping the people of Gaza, he's been doing nothing but harm to the axis of resistance. And the same is true with these oil and gas-rich dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, especially Qatar, which it pretends through its TV to have sympathy for the Palestinian people, but in reality it gives its territory to the United States to use against Iran, against Yemen, and against whoever is opposed to the United States and the Israeli regime. In fact, Tucker Carlson just recently in one of his shows said that the American base in Qatar is there. Everyone knows that it is there to protect the Israeli regime. It's not there to protect Qatar, it's there to protect the Israeli regime. So all the masks have been removed. And there's no doubt that Erdogan is in alliance with the United States, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They're all allies of the United States. They're not going to do anything that opposes key U.S. foreign policy, key U.S. foreign policy agenda. And without a doubt, in the Caucasus, the objective of NATO is to break the link between Russia and Iran, to encircle Russia and also to isolate Iran. But that's not going to happen. There's no way in the world that Iran will allow that to happen. Iran will make sure that Armenia's sovereignty is preserved, and it will also make sure, just as in the past, Iran was the first country to support Azeri, the sovereignty of the Republic of Azerbaijan, before Aliyev expelled them under orders coming from the White House. And it is quite interesting, George, that the United States and the West is willing to sacrifice Christians across West Asia. And it is Iran and Hezbollah and the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces that protect the Christians, whether it was in Iraq, whether it was in Syria or Lebanon or Armenia or anywhere else. They were the ones who caused the destruction of Christian communities, the West and their allies, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, supported by the West and their allies. And it was these forces from the axis of resistance that protected the Christians across the region. And you visited the Christian and Jewish community in Iran. Iran is the country in the region which has Christian MPs in parliament and a Jewish MP in parliament. None of these allies of the United States have any of those things.
Or even a parliament in many cases. You mentioned the United States. Let me ask you, with your former hat as professor of American Studies, Alaska is an interesting choice for the big summit that's coming up on the 15th. You can measure the possibility of success in the talks by the length of Zelensky's face and the panic amongst his acolytes in the European Union government. What's your anticipation from this summit? Might we be in the last days of this war?
It's not impossible, but I remain somewhat skeptical because Trump promised to end this war before he came to power. And he said he'll finish it in one day, as we all remember. And it's been 6 months, over 6 months now. And the slaughter has only continued, and it has really intensified. And so I think Trump is a weak leader. And I think that he knows that he has to end the war because, especially now that the Ukrainian army is collapsing on all fronts, things are falling apart. And I think the real incentive for him to bring a halt to this war is not because he definitely has no humanitarian concerns because he's carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza, but he sees that everything is falling apart. However, the forces against an end to the war, not the Europeans, they're not important, they count for nothing, but the deep state and the neocons, they still want this war. And I'm not sure if he is going to be able to, if he really wants to end the war, to do so under the sort of pressure that we're seeing from the neocons. And we're seeing how they're already depicting this as a potential capitulation and defeat for the United States. They're making it more difficult for the war to end. And of course, they're making money, they're making their billions. That's what this was all about. What surprises me what doesn't surprise me is what these neocons are seeking, because they are selfish and inhumane people. What surprises me is the degree to which the Europeans are hell-bent on destroying Europe. They destroyed their relationship with Russia. They created an energy crisis. At the time when the war began, they had an opportunity to have a nuclear deal with Iran. Winter was approaching, and the winter of Europe continues today. If they had that deal with Iran, they could have invested in oil and gas and at least made that energy crisis that they're confronting today less painful. But no, they had to wreck their relationship with Russia and Iran, and now they've capitulated to the United States, and they're going to buy their natural gas from there at a huge inflated price. But at the same time, they're insisting, these corrupt elites, on continuing the war with Russia. That's what surprises me, the degree to which these European leaders have no regard whatsoever for their own people, and of course, for the poor soldiers in Ukraine who are being slaughtered every day.
That's because you don't know them like I do. But we are eternally grateful to you, Professor Marandi, for these regular tuitions that you have been given us, entirely free of charge. Much obliged to you, sir. Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls coming up next. Stay tuned. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something.
even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Netanyahu annex Gaza into Greater Israel, yes or no? 25,000 people have now voted. Most people, though not by a landslide, think that Netanyahu will annex Gaza into Greater Israel. Let me have your point of view as quickly as you can. But first, Mo in Texas wants to talk about Palestine. Mo, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. How are you? I just want to...
By the grace of God, good, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. You're the most knowledgeable reporter or a reporter or TV channel that ever seen in the whole entire world. Because I'm watching pretty much whole day. That's all I watch, the news. And your show, I watch it at least once every day. Either daytime or nighttime. At least I watch your show. Actually, right now, I'm just watching your show with my friend, Iranian professor. But anyway, one thing that I called earlier to mention that at the very beginning of the war between Israel and Lebanon or Gaza, one reporter asked Netanyahu, that you by bombing Palestine, you killing the children. His answer was exactly as I'm quoting. Yes, these are the children that they will grow and become terrorists. So this is very political. That because of that answer and the trouble that he would go through from later, which is now, that he killing the children in purpose. So therefore, all the governments anywhere, especially US and UK and others, they censor the question not to be mentioned ever again. That's why maybe been mentioned once other time, but as far as I'm concerned, watching every report channels, anywhere that I possibly can, I never ever hear that question be mentioned again, not even once. That was only one time, and that's it. So now is the time to prove that Netanyahu really killing children in purpose. That question and answer that should be brought up. And then some channel especially...
Well, I'll tell you what, Mo, they may not talk about it in English much now, but on their own television, in their own language, they talk about it very openly indeed. This phrase that you just gave me, which is a Hitlerian phrase, it's the very rationale which the Hitlerites, the fascists in the Holocaust, used to justify the slaughter of little children who were separated from their parents at the railheads in the death camps. That when people asked, why do you have to kill the children? He said, because they'll grow up to hate us and want revenge for what we are doing, have done to their parents. I mean, you couldn't get a more quintessentially Nazi formulation than that you heard with your own ears. But I follow the Hebrew media very, very closely. And almost every day, in fact, actually every day, almost every hour, there are people on television shows saying exactly those words, and sometimes even more horrifically. Mo in Texas, new caller, Don't be a stranger. Call us anytime. Now, comments you can put on the QR code. Now, leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Scan it now, that QR code, and that'll allow you to directly appear, as it were, on the show, like KSN 641. Carrying a walking stick is now a sign that you support a proscribed terrorist group. And Peter Pauletti says, what will the Sunni puppets do now when the Zionists demolish Al-Aqsa? Will they still be silent? I don't think so, Peter, though you do. I think that any demolition of Al-Aqsa will unleash a tidal wave, a tsunami of religious war right across the world. Abu Swahal Musafir says Shia Muslims, unlike the Arab Sunni Muslims, will never give up on their brothers and sisters despite hardships and obstacles. Lebanon, fight for your rights. Well, of course, the Palestinian resistance are not Shiite. The Yemeni resistance are not Shiite, but rather Zaydi, which is neither Sunni nor Shia. Many of the people, as the professor just told us, who will defend the Lebanese resistance are not Shia. Many of them are Sunni, and even a decent number of them are Christian. Adrift in a Boat says, instead of blaming UEFA, Mohammed Salah should have blamed Israel directly and called out the genocide. Maybe he's worried about his pay packet. Well, I like to say the glass is half full rather than half empty. I had a lot to say about Mohammed Salah on the show and right across social media. Millions of people heard me. And within 48 hours, Mo Salah did say something. You're right, he did not attack Israel himself, but he asked a beautiful and brilliant question. UEFA had put out a condolence note on the death, as they put it, of Palestine's national football team captain, but without mentioning that he hadn't died, he'd been killed, murdered, without mentioning where he'd died, killed, murdered, without mentioning who killed him, murdered him, and what he was doing at that moment when they killed, murdered him, namely queuing in a bread line in the vain and desperate hope of getting some small morsel of food with which to feed his wife and children. So Mohammed Salah, and I take my hat off to him for that, Mohammed Salah very pointedly asked UEFA, who killed him, where, and why? And that simple question has been viewed tens of millions of times, scores of millions of times right around the world. So I got millions, but Mo Salah's response got scores of millions. And you know, it's right to criticize people who are doing nothing or not doing enough. It's right, and I do it myself all the time. But when people start to move, when people start to respond to your criticism, in my honest opinion, with all respect to you, it's better to accept with good grace that these people have begun to move in the direction you believe they need to move. That's, after all, how you persuade people. If people think that if they change their mind, if they start to do what we've been asking them to do, that we'll come down on them like a ton of bricks, asking, why didn't you do this before? Why didn't you say this before? That's only going to weaken us. It's going to make it less likely that people will change and will begin to do what we are asking them to do. So I appeal to you, my friend. I know, of course, what you're saying and the power behind it, but I appeal to everyone. If you now see people starting to say what they should have been saying long before now, don't attack them for the time it took them to get there. There'll be plenty of time for post-mortem. There'll be plenty of time for history to record who did what and when they did it. But for now, this is a matter of life or death for 2 million people. And we desperately need all the allies, all the friends that we can get. Annette Coughlin says, Starmer and Lamy, along with America, have blood stains on their souls that will never be washed away. The Arab countries have failed the Palestinian people. Disgusting. Online too, in Paris, is Roy. He wants to talk about Palestine, and he is a new caller too. Welcome, Roy. What do you want to say?
Good evening, George. I feel honoured to talk with you. I've been following you for the last 20 years since I've had a mobile phone, since I've had a computer. I've even donated the time when you came out with your documentary, The Killings of Tony Blair, and I proudly have your poster signed on my wall in my lounge room. What I wanted to say was...
Fantastic.
It's very,
very glad.
Thank you. What I wanted to say is I find it really unfortunate, which is already happening in the Western world, is that everybody's splitting into factions, even in a friendly circle. And what I wanted to mention is that even if today you say that just by military and economic superiority, that Israel should stop trying to attack Iran, because Iran, just by numerical superiority and its allies, would beat Israel. And just for that fact, I've been accused of being an anti-Semite, which I find really regrettable, when I do believe that, unfortunately, that the things are the way they are in Israel. That a peaceful solution has to be found before the whole region and maybe even the world goes up in blazes.
Well, that's exactly my point of view, Roy. And as to the false accusations of anti-Semitism, most people realize by now that these are false. After all, if everybody is an anti-Semite, if the Pope is an anti-Semite, if the United Nations is an anti-Semite, if the BBC can be accused of being anti-Semitic, if you go around accusing everybody who is against what Israel is doing of being an anti-Semite, you have bankrupted the words anti-Semite. You have bankrupted the term, which is very dangerous, by the way, because anti-Semites do exist. They are there. I see some of the things that they say, and I am aware of some of the things that they do or would like to do. So anti-Semitism is a real thing. Just like other forms of racial hatred, it is something to be deplored. But if you weaponize the term as a means not of identifying anti-Semitism, but of identifying those who are opposed to Israel, Zionism, a political ideology, then you are taking terrifying risks, including with the safety and definitely with the reputation of Jewish people as a whole. So don't let that get you down, Roy. Some, literally, of the best people in the world have been accused of being anti-Semitic over these last few years. And a good many of those, believe it or not, were themselves Jewish. Now, big drum roll for this week's top donors. Making it onto the wall of fame this week, Jack Walker, Amanda Howell, Dr. Gary Bonsall, Douglas McFarland, and Elaine Ryan. A big thanks to each and every one of you, and to all those who were able to donate lesser amounts. And you can all do that. You all must do that on our website, moats.tv, MOATS.tv, or through our Patreon page, the TMPM, I'll remember the address. So moats.tv is the best, most efficient way that you can support the show. Give £1, give $1, give €1 to support twice weekly the mother of all talk shows. Let me take a quick break, because coming up right after it is the one and only Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and we're going to deep dive into the icy waters of Alaska and other things. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Will Netanyahu annex Gaza, integrate Israel, yes or no? And you can vote, I think, for about the next 45 minutes, so get your vote in. Now, our MOATS podcast is doing phenomenal business. You can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And this week, we're in the top 10 in Saudi Arabia, in South Africa, and in Egypt. 3 very important places to be in the top 10. We're in the top 40 for politics in New Zealand, in the Netherlands, and Japan. Just think about that. You can listen in also to the weekly podcast via the moats.tv website. The next guest is the eminent former military officer, former Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, who's forgotten more about war than most people will ever know. Colonel Davis, thanks as always for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. There's so much I'd love to cover with you, but we better start in the icy waters of Alaska. What do you think is going to happen when the big men meet on the 15th of August?
No, you have to look at the what each side brings to the table there and how much leverage one has against the other. And when you do that, you see that President Trump just has very little leverage, very few cards to play, and all of the power cards are in President Putin's hands. So I saw lots of reports that, especially on Western media, that Putin was considering surrendering some of the territory that he has in the Zaporizhia and the Kherson provinces in the south, and in exchange for swapping territory, as Trump put it on Friday, by requiring the Ukrainian side to withdraw from parts of the Donbass. I guess everything is possible, but I cannot imagine that Russia would do that, because they don't have to do that. And why would they hand a tremendous victory to the other side when they don't have the power to actually compel Russia to do that? What I think is probably more likely is that President Putin is going to say, hey, we're willing to engage in diplomacy and end this on the terms we've been talking about since June of 2024. And that includes all of the 4 territories and the withdrawal from all of them. He may do some sort of a temporary air ceasefire, because that's the one thing that would benefit Russia periodically. But he definitely won't do a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, because that would help Ukraine and harm Russia. They won't do that. But you have to have the capacity and the leverage to compel compliance on the other side, on the Russian side, if you want them to give away any territory that they currently have. And there's nothing on the Ukraine side that can do that, so Trump has no leverage to compel it. So what I fear may be the bigger issue is that Putin may come and say, we're going to hold to the same things I said in June 2014, and either you guys comply with it or we're going to continue to roll all the way up until we seize everything to the Dnieper River and possibly beyond.
Well, the Russian army gained 7 kilometers this day alone. The pace of advance is quickening markedly. The disarray in the rear of the Ukrainian side is plainly evident. Whether it's Klitschko, whether it's Zaluzhny on the front page of Vogue, they're all jockeying for Zelensky's position. The Azov, the Nazi formations, are issuing dread warnings in Parliament to Zelensky that his show is over and the rest. And the brutal way in which people are being swept off the streets and shanghaied to the front with their wives and mothers holding on to them, trying to stop it. All of that speaks to a collapsing situation in the rear and a heavy, powerful advance by the Russians at the front. So the point you make about cards, after all, it was Donald Trump who introduced that concept when he told Zelensky months ago in the Oval Office, you don't have any cards. So what cards does Donald Trump have to play?
I think Trump does have a few. He's not without any kind of leverage. He could say, listen, we want this war to be over too. We want to get back to a normalized relationship because however this war is concluded, Russia's still going to exist. Europe is still going to exist. We're still going to exist. We have to live together. We got to figure some ways out. We have the New START treaty, which is going to expire in February of this year. We need to work on that. We obviously the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty has expired already. Now Russia's saying they're no longer abiding by it. So that's not good. We need to try to put that back together somehow because we've got to look beyond this war. And Trump can say, hey, listen, we can talk about maybe releasing some sanctions and to normalize relations in exchange for there won't be much because Russia just Putin himself can't just give away some of this territory here because he's already incorporated it into their constitution, and he would face a revolt at home if he actually gave that stuff away because then he would make his word no good to ethnic Russians who are banking on him doing what he wants here. So Putin himself is limited here, and Trump as well is what he can get. But I think that if you can just say, hey, let's just get the war over with so the bleeding stops, the destruction of Ukraine stops, and everybody can at least start the very difficult and painful process of recovering from all this that everybody's going to have to do so that we don't have the risk of an expanded war, which is still on the table.
What are the risks for Putin in going there? You and I both know, but it's not widely known, it's certainly not widely reported, that there are many people in Russia, some of them in the Kremlin itself, who think that Putin has treated this whole thing with far too thick velvet glove, that he should have ended it long before now and could have ended it long before now. If Putin were to make major concessions, what would the impact of those be?
Well, I mean, truly, and I've had a number of folks even on my show talk about this and some of the sources that I've pinged from the Russian side, and they say they think that this whole issue of talking to, first of all, to Witkoff last week and then to Trump here in Alaska probably is some sort of like 3D chess move by Putin, or at least they say it better be, because if what's being reported turned out to be true and he gave away territory that they have the power to not just hold on to but continue to take more, there would be a great deal of anger among many sources inside of Russia. And I can't say with any confidence that that would literally turn into a revolt but you can't dismiss that because it would make people really, really angry at Putin. And I just don't see any reason, given everything he said from before the war all the way back to 2008, and then he would suddenly change course at the last one when, as you pointed out there, the fabric of the Ukrainian army is starting to shatter. There is no reason for him to give in to anything now. So anybody who's hoping he's going to, I think it's going to be disappointed.
Well, what happens if disappointment is the result? Trump has got the European, I'm going to call them leaders in inverted commas, yapping at his heels like chihuahuas. He's got little Zelensky, less than a chihuahua. What's less than a chihuahua? A sausage dog, a Dachshund. Barking in the sidelines. Is Trump taking any risks here?
Well, listen, I think that this can best be illustrated by something in the Telegraph today. Maybe you saw it. It said that Trump betrays Ukraine. And I'll just tell you that when I read that, it actually made me angry. I was hot because what these guys doing, and this represents the elite thinking in both London and Washington and really all over Europe, is that all of this is Donald Trump's fault. Donald Trump is the bad guy. Sure, Putin's bad too, but Trump is the real bad guy because everything was set up and we were doing everything to help Ukraine win, and now he's coming, maybe going to give it away. Oblivious to the fact that we're only in this problem right now because the Western elite refused to make the diplomatic moves necessary to prevent this from starting war in the first place, going all the way back to Minsk, really going all the way back to 2014 and how we participated in the civil war that broke out in Ukraine, then the Minsk, then December 2021, and of course the famous one in Istanbul in 2022, and all the way forward. Every diplomatic off-ramp we've had, we refused. Instead, all we wanted to talk about was more war, more arms, more ammunition, and continue fighting. So we are in this process right now where Trump, who is the only one talking about ending the war, the only one in the West, he may, quote, give away something to Ukraine, to Russia, but he's not giving away anything. Russia took it because of our unwillingness to do anything that was rational and logical and could have ended the war and benefited all of us, or at least limited the damage in Ukraine, but benefited the rest of the Western world. We refused to do that, and now we're trying to blame it on Trump for conceding to reality here. And that's the big problem, is that we have that mentality that we can do anything we want. There's never any kind of consequences or results. And now that we see that that spin only works on TV, it doesn't work in reality. And now then we may, if we keep that mentality, we could be getting in even more trouble after this thing is resolved, however it is, because if we keep on pretending like we need to keep supporting war against Russia, now that they have won, we need to get ready for another war, then we could be setting ourselves up for literal destruction.
Now, Colonel, paint us some color, will you? I know the predominant color in Alaska is probably white, but paint us a picture of what's going to be happening on the 15th. I mean, does Alaska have a place that you can have a summit?
You know, Alaska, Alaska
what
is
about
actually
security?
Yeah, Alaska is actually gorgeous in the summer. As a matter of fact, it's just a spectacular countryside. But I've been there one time on business, and it's just gorgeous. But yeah, there's plenty of places to have it, of course, and part of the sparsity is what makes it an appealing site because it's easier to secure. And obviously, it's Russia and the United States are close at certain points, just across I think the Bering Straits is what it is in between the two countries. Mm-hmm. So in terms of that goes, yeah, it's logistically, it's still going to be hard because you're talking about throwing this whole thing together in a week, and that's really hard when you're talking about two of the biggest heads of state on the planet, two of the biggest nuclear superpowers. So it's going to be some logistics challenges, but all those things can be worked out. The real issue is going to be, what happens on the ground between the two. And like I said, I think that most of the cards are in Putin's hands, so we'll see how that works out.
Do you think it'll be a one-day thing, or is there somewhere I presume there's hotels there, forgive my ignorance, but how can you accommodate two such high-value targets in a place like Alaska if the thing stretches into a second day, maybe even a third day?
Yeah, we've actually had big summits there before. We hosted a Chinese delegation at the beginning of the Biden administration in Anchorage, Alaska, and it lasted, I think, a bit of time. So it's definitely doable. But the real issue is in terms of time. This is unusual in that ordinarily when you have heads of state to get together, especially in a conflict, their staffs have already worked out nearly everything, and the heads of state are just going to do the final, nuances. But here, virtually nothing's been agreed to. Just one meeting with Steve Witkoff prior to this, and now there's no time in between, and most of the action is just the logistics getting together. So I doubt this will go more than a day and maybe even just a few hours, unless some kind of big breakthrough is made. But my gut tells me that the Russian side is primarily going to say, hey, here's what we'll agree to, and we're willing to do this. But if you don't agree to this, then we're just going to keep fighting. So that wouldn't take a lot of time. The longer it goes, the better news, because that means that there's something to actually negotiate and talk about. But if it's short, it's not going to be good for our side.
You don't think that a deal has probably already been, initialed, and that they're meeting merely to sign it? I take your point. The Witkoff meeting was only a few days ago, and it was only 3 hours, so I don't know how they would have done it, except by email, secure email, I hope. But it's not normal for two superpowers to meet without knowing what the outcome is going to be. And it's just a bit unpredictable, that, isn't it?
I agree entirely. That, in fact, I think Trump, my gut tells me that he thinks that his force of personality is going to sway Putin to do something that Trump wants him to do, that's maybe against some of his Putin's self-interest. You have Trump saying that he ended 6 wars, and he had Armenia and Azerbaijan the other day. So I think that he believes that he can get things done that nobody else can. He kind of bragged on himself about the Armenia and Azerbaijan. So regardless of what anybody else thinks, he thinks that he brought that together. And I think he's bringing that same mentality into here. And this is not the same situation, so I hope he doesn't think that. Likewise, on the other side, I think that Putin is coming in knowing that he's got the leverage and that he can say, hey, I'm willing to be your friend, and I like to have good relations, but these are my red lines, my no-pin red lines. We're not going to move from this, and he doesn't have to. So it can be a short or a long negotiation, but if it doesn't end up where Putin wants, he has the leverage to just walk away. But see, I think I think Trump's taking a much bigger risk here, because if Trump comes away, brings Putin onto American territory, and then either gets Putin to agree to something that Zelensky won't agree to, that the European Union won't agree to, then there's no deal, because Trump walks off looking like he's powerless against our own side. And if he doesn't agree to this, then he comes off looking powerless against Putin. And Putin comes away saying, no, we haven't given up on any of these points here. So Trump is taking some big risks. But Putin, I think, he can come out win no matter how it goes, because he can say, hey, I tried to have peace and negotiations, but nobody was willing to give in on anything. The only path they left me was war. Or if he gets the negotiation, he comes off looking good, that he got something for the Russian side in the negotiating table. So I think it's an easier play for Putin and a much bigger risk for Donald Trump.
Finally, Colonel, how is it playing in Peoria? What's American public opinion saying about this summit?
Well, it's exactly what you would expect. The Republicans are saying, he's a great American. He's a great negotiator. He can make deals happen where nobody else could. You had Lindsey Graham on American television this morning saying, yeah, I think it's a great idea that he's going to, get Putin to swap some territories. I think that's wonderful, even though Lindsey Graham himself said that was a terrible idea earlier in the war. But he's all behind because he's a golfing buddy of President Trump. And so most of the Republicans are falling in line. And, of course, you have, just like that piece in the Telegraph I referenced earlier, you have a lot of the Democrats are saying, you're betraying Ukraine, you're just giving things away, you're just handing on a silver platter over to Russia, et cetera. So, I mean, it's just the narrative. It's not really based on reality.
Russia, Russia, Russia. Colonel Davis, thank you very much indeed for joining us again on the mother of all talk shows. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, host of the unmissable, actually, Daniel Davis Deep dive. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls, right up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decision. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing. And he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you know, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Netanyahu annex Gaza into Greater Israel, yes or no? You've got exactly 20 minutes left to vote. On Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Most people, I'm bound to say, think that Netanyahu will annex Gaza into Greater Israel. I myself don't believe that he'll be able to, but don't let that influence how you vote. Let's go down under where, well, it's tomorrow morning already, and very early tomorrow morning, where Hanan in Sydney wants to talk about the Sydney rally. Go ahead, Hanan. It was very impressive on the bridge. Looked to be 100,000 people there or more. And although the elements conspired, it was heavy rain and very cold, not what we tend to associate with Australia. It was a magnificent turnout. Were you there?
Hi, good morning, George. Thank you for having my call. I would like to talk about the rally. Actually, the number is more than that. It was, in my opinion, more than 300,000. The harbor bridge was completely full. Like the people who started the rally, we support the rally to go to the at the American Council incident.
Hanan, hold your phone up and close to your mouth, please.
Hello?
No, we'll need to fix that. I'll need to go on to Bermuda, where the weather's very much nicer. Rolf is in Bermuda on Palestine and the Ukraine. Go ahead, Rolf.
Hi, George. It's good to be with you again.
And you.
As to Ukraine, George, I just think that the game is up. You know, the neocons want to have their own way over there. They are just determined to have endless war. We know that the Anglo-American elite and the German counterparts they believe in the zero-sum game. You cannot have a win-win with them. They win and you lose. And those wars are going to continue to go on. Just moving on to Gaza, if I may, George, I just want to say this.
Yeah.
We talked about the MOATS fella, and I love the way that the moral courage he showed, and you're right about the way he framed that question to the football authorities. But I'm thinking of another young boy, or a young boy in this case, the young fella Amir. You know, you have that whistleblower who actually resigned from masquerading as as an aid worker, when in fact it's a mercenary group that is distributing that aid. And they seem to take just as much delight in shooting innocent Palestinian civilians as the IDF. Well, you have the story, I mean, this was just so heartbreaking, of this young fellow, Amir. He looked no more than 5 or 6. He walked for miles to get to this desk queue, I would call it, I guess, to pick up a few items of food. He probably hadn't eaten in maybe days. He ended up shaking the whistleblower's hand as a measure of respect.
He kissed
and
it.
as a measure of saying thank you.
He kissed the hand.
Only then to walk away.
He kissed his hand. Yeah.
Kissed his hand, that's right. He kissed his hand, and then only to walk away, and then they fired a tank shell in the direction of where he ended up amongst the group, and he was killed. Again, this is what's going on here. And so again, George, I can't hear you. I'm just saying, again, we have the fact that the Germans now are saying they are not going to, they're going to also recognize a Palestinian state. But the reality is, I didn't hear them say that they were going to stop supplying weapons to Israel. Many people may not know this, but they're the second largest purveyor of weapons to Israel. The reality is that this is round 3 for Germany. You have a genocide in German Southwest Africa, now called Namibia, at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century. Number 2 was what happened in terms of World War II. And number 3 is now their complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Yet they still will not call for an end of the war. As to Keir Starmer, I call him the duplicitous one, the perfidious one. He went and outsourced the overflights over Gaza to a private American contractor, yet did not tell the public that they were doing so. That is a height of what we're facing here.
Yeah, he didn't tell the public.
These people are war criminals.
He didn't tell the public, Rolf. He didn't tell the public that he'd started, and he didn't tell the public that he'd finished. He never revealed to the public. In fact, on Christmas Day, you may recall, he was filmed using our gallant airmen and women as a photo op. He thanked them for the work that we cannot talk about. What kind of democracy has its armed forces doing work that we cannot talk about? But as you say, under the real threat of having to face the legal music, eventually, he's now stopped doing it and has subcontracted it. We, the British, are paying an American mercenary company to conduct the overflights of Gaza that we ourselves, through our Royal Air Force, were previously doing, with the public and the Parliament not consulted about either decision. Rolf, great call. We're definitely coming out to see you in Sandy Lane as soon as we can. Now, tonight's big donors, bristling with new names, I may say, and I'm deeply grateful for that. A big shout out to Jonathan Hughes, Kenneth Morris, Shabir, Paul Brannan, and David Waltham. You get your name on to the Wall of Fame. If you want to join them, head over to MOATS.tv and make a donation, please. Now, on a better line is our good friend from down under in Sydney, where it's a winter's morning. Hanan, welcome back. You had told us that you thought the attendance was very much greater than the figure I gave. So tell us, what kind of people were on that rally, and what impact has it made on Australian public opinion, Australian politicians?
George, the number was more than that. First, police, they said, they announced on TV at the first time, they said 10,000. Then they said 90,000. In my opinion, was more than 300,000. because not people, the bridge was completely full, and the rally was supposed to go to American Council building in Sydney, but then because of the huge number, police asked, they said for safety, to go back, and everybody to go back from the point that we started. So there was also numbers of people which they didn't start the rally yet. They didn't. They didn't pass the bridge yet. Exactly. They were left behind, and because people, we all began to go back. So that's all those people. No one accounted them. So that's why, in my opinion, was more than 300,000, and I'm so happy that we did the rally. The rally was so beautiful. It was very, very cold, very rain, but people in Sydney, everybody wants, who attend the rally, we just said, we want to say that we are against genocide against what is happening to Gaza. And
and what impact has it made, Hanan?
You know, for me, I every week, almost every week, we go and rally, but not as big as this one, but nearly for 2 years. I ask myself, what is this? Can do something? My answer to myself, I'm happy to do whatever I can do. If I can say, if my voice will reach to anyone or to wake up anyone that there is something, there is genocide happening in Gaza, then I'm happy to do it. And I hope the politics in Sydney, they will hear what Sydney people want. I think, in my opinion, the government in Sydney, somehow they supporting Israel. Even they tried not to let the rally go ahead. But through the Supreme Court, the organizer, they won the case. So if we can say to the government that that's what Sydney people want. We want ceasefire. We want peace. We want what's happening in the killing in Gaza to stop killing kids, stop killing women.
Well, that's a very beautiful call, Hanan. And may God bless your efforts and reward them. We never know what impact our action will have. I always put it this way. It's my duty as a believer to do everything that is in my power to do. And even if I happen to persuade no one, at least on the judgment day, it will be known that I did indeed do everything that I could to stop this very, very great time. This crime of the century, a crime perhaps of the last 100 years, certainly the last 75. Thanks for that, Hanan. Antonio Cristoforu says, Putin will, I fear, be having breakfast in America as a hostage, facing a kangaroo court. Super Trump will parade him in chains behind bars in Washington, with jester Zelensky poking him with a stick. Well, if that happens, Antonio, we won't be around to see it, because World War III will have commenced. And Sammy Gitt says President Maduro offering $50 million for unreleased Epstein files in response to Trump's earlier announcement of $50 million bounty for Maduro's capture was brilliant. It was indeed. Citrus One says Putin going to Alaska is foolish. He's taking a big risk with his safety for a very uncertain benefit to Russia. And KSN 641 says Putin is peed off with Azerbaijan and Türkiye. That's why he agreed to meet in Alaska rather than Istanbul. Personally, I think he's making a big mistake going to Alaska. Istanbul, Türkiye, is the safest. I must ask Gayatri later what all this Türkiye business is about. Is this a bit like Kiev? It's Turkey to me. Mick DB2 says Putin will let Trump play his hand. Russia knows that the US wants to leave the EU and the UK to carry on the war of attrition while the US sorts out China. Okay, from Washington, D.C., we've got the big Amish. That's his name. And he wants to talk about Putin and Trump. Go ahead, Amish.
Hi there, George. I'm a first-time caller. Yeah, I do want to talk about Putin and Trump. Number one, if the war is resolved, his adversaries would clearly not relish that. They would be disappointed, and they would use that and promote the Russian puppet theory again. But for the rest of us, I do believe resolving a war of such magnitude is in everyone's interest at a reasonable level as a common man. Sure. It resolves, and they could go on to other problems. But here's the key to this. Potentially, here's a what if for you, George. And if you agree, I want you to give me a hat salute. What if during these discussions that Putin happens to provide information regarding Obama, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden's involvement in Ukraine? And to further that even further, what if Snowden is transferred to Trump? What would that do? Would that be the death knell to his adversaries? I want to hear what you think.
Well, let me give you the hat tip, because those are two very interesting hypotheses. I think the first is far more likely than the second. In fact, I'd be surprised if the Russians had not passed all the compromat that they have on the totally corrupt relationship that lasted for a decade between the democratic establishment, either directly or indirectly, through their sons, through their daughters, with the corrupt regime in Kiev. The most corrupt country in Europe had the sons and daughters of almost all of the top American politicians in their country doing business. And if that doesn't automatically make you suspicious, then I think you're making a mistake. And the truth is, the Russians will know all about that. They will know who took what, who earned what, or rather, who stole what from the whole American-Ukraine experience. Hunter Biden himself is getting close to some very powerful actors with some of the things that he has been saying over the last few days. So the possibility of CDs being handed over to Donald Trump, which help him to destroy his domestic enemies, is a very tantalizing possibility. Personally, I very much hope that he does. Putin will never hand over Snowden unless Snowden wants to be handed over, and unless Trump is willing to pardon him. So the Russians never betrayed their friends. Their whole history shows that. Unlike us, we betray our friends and forget their names before they've even counted the money they took out in the black plastic bin bags. We no longer remember who they are. Who's the last president of Afghanistan, I ask you? But the Russians never leave anybody behind, and they never betrayed their friends. So I'm sure that they will not be handing over Snowden against his will, but Snowden himself is the repository of vast treasure troves of intelligence. That much is for sure. Now, look, big news on Rumble. If you're watching on Rumble right now, a big thanks to Space Shot 76, who just raided our stream. It's a new feature. This means that he brought his viewers on his channel to the MOATS live stream tonight. That all went above my head, but you younger people will know exactly what our director is talking about. Welcome to all of Space Shot's viewers. If you've just joined us, please click subscribe and like the stream. Terry is in Massachusetts. He wants to talk about Putin and Trump too. Welcome, Terry. What do you want to say?
George, it is a great honor to speak with you. I have a comment to make about this summit coming up. This could be the shortest meeting, shorter than the Sonny Liston Cassius Clay fight. With one question Putin has to ask Donald Trump. All he has to say is, if Canada and Mexico were hostile to the United States and Russia were supplying them with weapons, what would you do? And if he cannot answer that, that meeting is over, George. So to borrow a phrase from the great George Galloway, what say you?
Well, how beautiful, Terry, and my apologies for misgendering you. My people normally put up when it's a female with a name that could be male. So my apologies for that. And it's a beautiful call, and it was over almost as fast as the Sonny Liston, Cassius Clay, as he then was, fight. It would be a delight to see that flooring. It would be an epiphany to see Trump floored by that. But I think that what you'll find is that it will not be over that quick. It'll be more like the long 15 round of diplomatic attrition, because Trump cannot afford to be seen to have, quote unquote, capitulated quickly. They'll have to produce a lot of detail so that the underlying question of who won, who lost, will not be so immediately apparent. It will have to be wrapped up in all kinds of conditionalities. If you do this, I'll do that. I think the one certainty, Terry, is that there will be an air ceasefire. So no more bombing raids, no more drones, no more missiles fired to or from each other's territory. But that will not stop the land war. And in the land war, Russia is prevailing very, very rapidly now. As I said, just this day, by 7 o'clock this evening when I came on air, Russia had advanced 7 kilometers. Now, that's a long way in the middle of a war to advance through the enemy's front line. So I don't think it will be over as quick as Liston Ali. It may be that Putin will have to, as he did, I think, to Ernie Terrell, keep him standing up, keep Trump standing up for as long as possible, even though he could put him down. But I'm very much hoping, Terry, that this ends on the 15th of August, not just so I can celebrate it in my birthday the next day. Beautiful call. Terry in Massachusetts. Mo in Ottawa wants to talk about Palestine. Go ahead, Mo.
Hi. I saw previously that you endorsed a one-state solution. And while I think that would be like the best case scenario, I'm not sure if it's like realistic. And even if it is realistic, I think it would require more suffering from the Palestinians than a two-state solution would.
Well, when is this two-state solution coming along?
Yeah, it's probably not realistic either. But in terms of like a comparison, I think that it would still be more realistic than.
Well, if there's two things that are equally unrealistic. Why fight for the one that doesn't solve anything anyway? Why fight for the one that we have been waiting for since 1993? It was signed, the Oslo agreements were signed in 1993. It's now 2025. An ocean of blood has been shed between then and now, and not 1 centimetre of Palestine is free. So why keep flogging a dead horse, Mo? If you show me a two-state solution, show it to me, I'll take my hat off and congratulate you. But until you can show me it, until you've got it, why do you want me to stop campaigning for the thing that is not only right in principle, as you yourself just acknowledged, but actually is a solution, as opposed to the so-called two-state solution, which hasn't happened, won't happen, and isn't a solution at all. Last word to you, Mo.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but it is the best-case scenario, but I think it would probably require more suffering from the Palestinians than a two-state solution would.
Well, but the Palestinians are suffering, and they are getting no two-state solution. You know, when people tell you what they are, you should believe them. The Israeli parliament voted last week to annex the West Bank. The governing Likud coalition, one permutation or other of which will govern Israel in the long foreseeable future, no alternative political coalition other than that is remotely feasible or visible. They have made it plain there will be no two-state solution. I mean, why persist in something when the other party tells you it's never going to happen and is meanwhile paving the entire territory that was supposed to be the Palestinian state with new Israeli settlements, new highways, new fortresses, new walls, new barbed wire. I mean, at what point do you say, I'm flogging a dead horse here with this two-state solution, which isn't even a solution, for all the reasons you know, and I don't have time to go back over. I'll deal with only one. There are more Palestinians living in exile, you may be one of them, than there are living in Palestine. And the two-state solution does not allow, indeed specifically precludes, the right of Palestinian refugees in exile to return to their homes. So we say, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, where one man, one woman, one child live as an equal, one as the other, under the law, under a negotiated constitution, and where one man, one woman, one vote decides the political direction of that new single state. So we've got a broadcast coming up, Mo. Myself, my friend Yvonne Ridley, who was with me today discussing the upcoming Scottish elections, in which she is our lead candidate, and other speakers. We are recording on Thursday. I don't know if it's live, but I'm sure we've got a flyer somewhere, or maybe Gayatri can elucidate. Thank you, Mo, in Ottawa, for that call. You got my blood going, son. Gayatri is in the studio with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, let's start with Turkey, or türkiye, which I've been telling you was an anti-Orientalist approach by many of our comrades who like to call it as the country itself prefers. And it is indeed the case that in 2022, the foreign minister of Turkey requested and submitted to the UN and has since been ratified for their name to be not Turkey, but türkiye. And it was part of a rebranding campaign to bring Turkey in a better light, represent its country's values and culture better, rather than have the negative connotation of the English word Turkey, which means a big chicken.
Okay, you persuaded me, I
go.
suppose, but I'm one of the last men still calling it Bombay and Calcutta, so maybe it's my age and class.
I also still call it Turkey, sorry. Emails then. One from Peter in Bedford, UK. I never knew Alaska was only 2.5 miles away from Russia, so maybe the former governor Sarah Palin was onto something when she supposedly said she could see Russia all the way from her house.
She was right.
Yeah, she was right.
She was unfairly ridiculed over that. On a clear day, you can.
Exactly.
But she claimed they were looking in our window. I think that was the point.
Well, maybe that part she exaggerated, but other than that, well, 2.5 miles, there you go. This Peter, by the way, is a Tory voter, and therefore doesn't share all your politics, but appreciates the show. He says,
thank you,
the guests on your shows are always thought-provoking and challenge my worldview, and I find that it's a better way to be open-minded. So that's wonderful. Alan in Wigan says, love the jacket, George. I chose it, Alan. Do you like it?
My wife turns me out well, Alan, yeah?
I fear that Zelensky and the collective West are planning something, maybe a false flag before the Alaska meeting on Friday. These people are insane. Anything to derail any chance of a peaceful resolution. This conflict will end on Putin's terms only.
Well, I mean, it can't be dressed up that way. I mean, Trump will have to get something, or he will put himself in quite serious domestic trouble. I've given you an idea. Why don't they announce a peace bridge to be built across the Bering Straits, linking Russia to the United States of America? Would that not be a great thing?
Groundbreaking. As groundbreaking as when President Donald Trump at the time went to the DMZ zone to meet Kim Jong-un.
The little rocket man.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, fair play to Trump. I mean, I don't know how this is going to work out, and I might have egg on my face come the 16th. But I think he's taking risks doing this. Dan Davis agreed with me. I think he's taking a risk, and fair play to him. If he pulls it off, he might just get that Nobel Peace Prize after all, or the Nobel War Prize anyway.
So the poll tonight, will Netanyahu annex Gaza into Greater Israel? Camille Wulanin says whether Israel calls Gaza annexed or under security control, the reality is identical. No sovereignty, total external rule. The distinction is a legal fig leaf. De jure annexation is just paperwork. The harm, the illegality, and the apartheid are already there. Norse Renegade says it's about stealing the trillions of cubic feet of natural gas in Gaza Marine. The US and the EU are desperate to get control before the winter sets in. The German economy will break if they don't have a cheap supply of gas. I guess blowing up the Nord Stream wasn't such a good idea, was it?
Well, fair point.
Yeah.
I mean, you know my views on this gas issue. There's no way it's going to be heating your home this winter. It's not even properly explored, never mind exploited. And any oil company stealing the gas from an illegal occupation, because it will always be an illegal occupation. This is something that some people miss. Because of the Chinese and Russian veto in the Security Council, the actual status of Gaza as illegally occupied will never change. Russia and China will never agree to lift that classification. And any oil company would be open to court action in their own countries from their own citizens if they were harvesting the gas of that's enriching
the illegal occupier of a country. That would be illegal not just under international law, but under their own domestic law. So I don't believe that the gas will be warming anyone's toes in Western households anytime soon.
So C. Celestius then says, those who imagine Gaza's future lies in neat annexation misunderstands both Netanyahu and the realities on the ground. Israel's prime minister, he thrives on managing crises rather than resolving them. A permanent low-grade conflict that keeps his coalition glued together and his rivals off balance. Now, a full annexation would saddle Israel with direct responsibility of 2 million embittered residents, a burden that Netanyahu has no desire to carry. Far more useful politically is a Gaza that remains a problem to be contained, a threat to be invoked, and a bargaining chip to be played.
What a clever message.
Yeah,
Who was that from?
So this is from C. Celestius.
Very, very
it's
good.
a very, it's exactly, actually, if you zoom out, then that's exactly the picture. He just has to manage the crisis and remain in power. Smart User says, who is going to stop Netanyahu? Most politicians in Western democracies are either bribed or blackmailed. Now, I wanted to tap on his democracies bit because we were at the International Forum on Democracy about 2 years ago in China. Yes, China. Yes, we all know China is ruled by the one Communist Party, but they host this huge international event on democracy, shared values. And the haters love painting China as some kind of dictatorship where the citizens have no freedom or no say. But the opposite is the truth, actually, because they've got a 5-year plan, which is like the socialist method of planning for national goals and economic growth. And this year, in preparation for the next 5 years, they launched this online consultation campaign, which meant that all the Chinese citizens could submit online suggestions for the next 5-year plan. And guess what? The results of this 1-month campaign are in, and over 3.11 million suggestions have been submitted directly from the Chinese to the government. And they go from little things like smoking on the streets, secondhand smoking, because it's a big problem in China, lots of people smoke, to food security and, tracing where their food on the table comes from. It's incredible. So you want to talk about democracy? Isn't this, as Xi Jinping says, a vivid example of a whole process, people's democracy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different kind of democracy. I'm not fighting for it here. I want socialism in British characteristics here. But the Chinese like it. Why wouldn't they? They have transformed their lives under this people's democracy in a way incomparable to any point in human history. 800 million people have been lifted out of poverty in the last 45 years. And China's economy, people say socialism doesn't work. I always say, have you seen China lately? And have you compared it to your own city centre, to your own job centre, to your own homelessness and all the other metrics by which it is plain, even to that blind man in the wheelchair, that the finest of the Metropolitan Police carted off yesterday. Look, I've got to cut you short, Gayatri, because there's a legend on the line. It is Erebos in New York, on Lebanon. I told you this is the global university of the airwaves. Last word to you, Erebos.
Greetings and salutations and a salubrious day, late evening, whatever time it is that you happen to be at. Wonderful shout out to the clan Galloway and of course the MOATS staff, the most wonderful Chaya, and special shout out to Mrs. Gayatri Galloway in her Disney princess royal burgundy. I could picture a crown on her head, but I'll suffice for the nimbus glow from her melanated complexion there, just magnificent. Just 3 quick bullet points. What's less than a chihuahua? Well, if you think about Cerberus, the 3-headed dog in Hades that guards hell, basically, the Greek hell, and you think about the Baltic states, they're like a teacup chihuahua with 3 heads, right? It's a mini teacup Cerberus. And we had this phenomenon here. I don't know if they had it over there in the UK or wherever. It might have been 12 years ago or so, where we have the muscle queens. So these are big, muscular gay guys that carry these tiny little rat-looking dogs, these little teacup chihuahuas. It was quite something to look at. Very, very hilarious. On a different thing, MOATS episode number 1 has been coming up in my YouTube feed all of a sudden. It's been happening for the past 3 days, so I'm going to check it out. They keep putting it towards me, and MOATS episode number 1 was streamed June 23rd, 2019. So I just wanted you to highlight, for me to highlight that. And finally, the wonderful, both guests were amazing as usual. I wouldn't expect anything less. But Professor Marandi, he inspired me to make an acronym, right? Family, Arab, Gulf, Gas, and Oil Dictatorships, or FAGGOD, FAGGOD. So there's that. And speaking about acronyms, I remember the magnificent Gadi Francis on your former program, PWOG. Have it out with Galloway, right? Come and have a go if you think you're hot enough. You know, I missed that program. But she said, and I'd spent specific, when she was speaking about Lebanon, I listened to her very, very carefully. And she mentioned that Hezbollah, all the reasons you stated, and you've actually lived there, but she stated that Hezbollah has made a peace with this government, knowing the full time that they're on the side of the Zionist terrorist occupation colony, ZTOC, another acronym for you, and the United Snakes. They're the puppet master behind it all. And now they're put in an inevitable situation that she has stated and highlighted. Now, if the government goes after them, and as you stated, it will be true, they're not strong enough to do it. But if Israel comes in direct confrontation in Lebanon, going after Hezbollah, it will not just be another precipitous end of the Zionist terrorist occupation colony, but also the government. That government needs to go, right? I understand how they have the sectarian setup, but if an actual full-blown, I'm getting too excited, full-blown war breaks out, then the government, that fake government has to go, and Hezbollah has to run that country. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, all bets would be off, Erobos, in that eventuality. In parenthesis, let me say that the erudition displayed in your short telephone call is great, exemplar of the vast global university of the airwaves that we have put together since that episode 1 in 2019 that you are just about to watch. I'm definitely going to watch it myself. I expect to see some technical advance. I expect to see some improvement in my presentational skills. But I don't expect to see any difference between the methodology I use in analyzing situations, or indeed any difference materially in those situations themselves. There's nothing new under the sun, Erobos. There's only new ways of looking at it. Your classical education, I happen to know, is entirely self-taught and on the mean streets of New York at that. And I personally was inspired by you, as you were inspired by Professor Marandi in your telephone call tonight, and many like it. It's been marvelous for me. If I don't go now, I'll be surcharged, and I won't be able to take my good wife out for chips. That's potato chips, not crisps, not casino chips, but the kind of deep fried potato chip that are part of the treasury, the legacy of Scotland. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.